This call is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please disconnect at this time.
Hi, guys. Thank you, and welcome to day 2 of week 2. And our topic today is the balance between two people is 100%. We've touched a little bit on this before, but we're going to go more into detail, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions as we go and really understand. I'm going to start the topic with a couple of small stories that'll give you an idea in real life how this is happening. When I was first new with energy and I could see it, I was really, really curious. So I was looking at everything, and I was sitting in a doctor's office with my eyes closed, and this dark bubble came in around this lady, and as she approached the line, the people in front of her, the bubble pushed up against the person who was in front of her. And then when somebody came in from behind her, she then was kind of squished between. Her bubble of energy was kind of squished and compacted. And then as people moved around her, you could see this bubble moving and trying to hold space and keep her in this safe place. And she ended up having to sit near me. And as I sat there, I just kind of, did my thing where I thought, well, she seems very uncomfortable. So I relaxed myself, to create resonance for her. And as I did, her bubble lessened. She didn't have to hold as much space between us. So my assumption is, I didn't actually ask her, my assumption is she's probably a high empath, and so she uses this bubble to kind of keep people's energy off of her. But the more I relaxed and the more peaceful I became, the easier and less the distance became between us. And I was able to lean over next to her and not have her bubble push me away. And then we started a conversation. It was just a nice experience. So that's just a casual person that I don't know. I don't have any details about. It's just something where, the balance between us can be affected by me holding space in myself. My second easy example is my 2-year-old grandson. Now, when he's with me, and he doesn't throw fits. He doesn't get crazy. And then I found out that when he's with other people, he is doing this. Now, during the process of our move in March, I had less time and I was less relaxed because I was falling into task-oriented behavior. And as that happened, I noticed he started throwing fits. And there was one day he was kicking and screaming. And I'm like, oh, this is new. And then I realized, no, people had told me he does this. And I thought, okay, so he is obviously showing the balance between us. He's used to me holding this space of peace, relaxation, and now he is uncomfortable because I'm not being me. So he's reacting to me not being me. And in that moment, I just took a few deep breaths, relaxed my muscles. This is another reason why it's important to practice these small exercises, because in that moment, it would have been really hard for me to change my breath or relax my muscles because I am running in task-oriented, deadline and getting a lot of things crammed into a small space. So because I have the experience and because I'm very capable of and have practiced things, I can do them in the moment. And immediately his fit stopped. He walked over, he gave me a hug, and then he went back to playing. And it's so obvious how we're impacting each other when you have these kinds of experiences. Now, my third one is really interesting because it's with me and my partner, and it's a little deeper than the two I've expressed. But between me and him, he tends to go into fear, and I tend to believe that fear is unreal. So I will hold a space where fear doesn't exist. And in his workspace, he has a lot of fear. So he had this experience of not trusting people to pay him. And he would go to work very uncomfortable, live in fear, and he would have a lot of drama. And then he'd come home and he'd want to bring that same experience into our relationship. And I'd be like, no, that's not happening here. And I would continue to hold the space of who I am. And as he would challenge me with behavior and beliefs, I'd say, no, that doesn't work here. That's not my life. I don't have these fears. I don't have to live that way. And over time, what happened, because I'm holding the balance of myself and continuing to hold the balance in the relationship, over time, his work life changed. He was able to then see that, oh, I'm in a safe place. When I trust myself, I can trust others. And he started coming home with these experiences saying, okay, I was worried, and when I was worried, this other person started to behave in a way, and I could see that it was happening at the moment I had the worry. And so he started understanding what was happening, not just holding the behaviors. He started to understand how he was affecting the rest of his relationships by holding his own space in a relationship as well. So this is a constant thing, balance between two people. And then there's also balance between group, but we won't get into that today. Are there any questions so far? Okay.
Were you actually expressing that to your husband out loud, or were you just saying that into yourself?
I express things out loud because I find that if I don't, so I can do it telepathically and impact others, but I find if I want the full expression of the change that I'm asking for, that I need to communicate things out loud. And a lot of people will say to me, well, so you really talk to people like that? And yes, because this is me and this is the way I talk, so of course I talk to people like that. And they'll say, well, how about your kids? Can you talk to your kids like that? Absolutely. I absolutely say, hey, so I have to express my guidelines, my boundaries, my consequence. I say, I don't feel good with the way I'm being treated. I don't feel good. I'm not saying that what they're doing to me is anything wrong, because then they go into defense or, well, such and such doesn't have a problem when I act like this. I say, well, I don't feel good right now. And later on, of course, I go through contemplation and I do my own part of healing myself. But in the moment, I get to ask for what I want because I'm an independent human being. And in a relationship, I have the right to have what I need. And I have the right to ask for it. This is another part that a lot of people get confused with and they get fearful in, is they think, okay, well, this other person has already expressed their need and I don't have the right to ask for something. And so I can give you an example in my own relationship with my partner. It did reach a point where I would give him the benefit that, oh, he's so busy. And I would start to feel like I don't have the right to ask him for things that he would normally do for me because right now he's so busy and he doesn't have the time. But the thing is, if I don't express myself, then I'm losing that 50% hold of my experience. I'm now giving them more power and authority in the relationship. And it could move to, say, like an 80-20, where 80% of the energy is on their side and only 20% left on mine. Now, why does this happen? It doesn't just happen because I didn't ask. It happens because we're pushed up against each other already, energetically, as human beings. And as I pull back, their energy automatically moves forward because the push that's normally there holding the balance has lessened. And so what will happen in most relationships when somebody pulls back is the other person starts getting more aggressive. The other person starts getting more impatient. Why? Because now their energy is stretched over a greater field. So it's a very delicate balance that needs to be maintained in a healthy way in order for everyone to feel good all the time. Did that answer your question and more?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. So you would say, because I had this question earlier before the call, but I think you kind of touched on it, where if someone is giving like the 80-20 and the person that's holding the 80% of the energy, do you feel that they would be uncomfortable with that too?
Yes, absolutely.
Because they get aggressive and they don't feel good. They want to be, people want to be equal, hold equal energy.
Right. And it's not only that, is without input, then they start searching and they're like, something's missing. And then they start asking questions, they start trying to control things, and they don't know why they're doing it. And they may come up to you and start jabbering, talking more than normal because, again, they're uncomfortable with this extra space that they're not used to in the relationship.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thanks.
Let me think. I'm trying to think of another good example that ties into that will help.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of my mom, how she does that thing where she'll, like, come out. I feel like she holds a little more of the energy right now, and she does act more aggressively towards me and talks and talks and talks.
Yep.
And I think she's uncomfortable holding that space. I think she's getting a little resentful of all the energy she's holding for me.
Yes. And so it can be experienced in many ways. Sometimes it's taking responsibility in our own lives for something And let me start with another part of this. Why would we give up part of our authority in our lives? Why would we let it get to that 80-20 where somebody else is holding the authority? It normally starts because, again, we're afraid to communicate. We see something and we don't understand it. And instead of asking the person about it, we just pull back a little. And so maybe only 2%, and then they pull forward. But when you think about entropy, and entropy is energy moving in a flow, and it will continue to move in that flow until it is changed. So when balance is normal and that push is equal, there's a really nice, firm, comfortable feeling in a relationship, and you can count on somebody, and you can feel supported, and you know you can ask for things. And so that's really, really comfortable. As soon as somebody starts to pull back, then again, you're now using more energy to fill up the space, and you're starting to feel drained. You're starting to think that you're giving too much. Even when you're not, you're going to have the same consequences in your energy, so it feels like it's too much. And the other person, think about it this too. As you're pulling in at 20%, now you're collapsing in on yourself. You have less space to move around in your own field. And so the vibrational impact is, it can create nervousness. It can create anxiety. So anybody who holds less of their space, those are some very typical experiences that they'll have. Self-doubt, that's another one that happens when you pull back too much. So here we have a moment of self-doubt in a relationship, and it doesn't get questioned or talked about. So for instance, in a parent and a child, when the child is older, the child is now, hey, I'm an independent person, I have my own life, but now I'm under the thumb of my parent again, and they fall back into habitual behaviors. So this is another thing that can distress the balance between two people, is habitualness. So as a person grows and changes, if we hold them to an idea of who they are, then they lose part of their authority. So for instance, if my kids are starting to learn to clean up around themselves, and one day I come home and the house is a mess, instead of just being patient and kind, talking to them about it, if I say, what the heck, I thought you guys knew how to do this. Why are you guys acting like this now? Suddenly, get your act together, clean up. Well, I've just taken away part of their authority, because as people learn and grow, they then plan their own schedules. They spend time the way they want to. They learn to interact with others. If I keep taking away their authority, then they could be, in all of their relationships, they're going to have this lack of authority. So allowing people to balance in their own space is a super important part of this. And recognizing when somebody grows and changes can be very beneficial to giving them the space to acknowledge it themselves and really hold it versus, oh, I had this great day, I was growing, I was advancing, and then suddenly I had all these fears and I regressed. Well, if you give them support, then they don't necessarily regress with fears. When a fear comes up, they can say, oh, no, I'm done with that. So now when I come in and the kids know that the house is a mess, they may look around and say, and they may anticipate by defending themselves and say, oh, I just made that mess, I'm going to clean it up in a minute. And I'll be like, oh, but I don't need that. But they're, again, acting on either an anticipation of an experience that's already in the past, or a fear that they may get something taken away from them because of experiences in the past. So in each moment, we balance the information. And what we tend to do that can destroy the balance between two people is look at the past and use that to predict the future. So this is why living in the moment becomes a critical part of the experience. If we can't live in the moment, then we can't keep this balance easily. It becomes this push and pull energy between two people all day long. And again, that in itself is very draining. And we stop asking and we stop sharing because it's just too much to give and take all day long. So allowing each person to have their authority in the moment, asking them if something looks the same, is it the same? Because in each moment we're different. And so we make assumptions about this moment based on the past. Give people the chance to be in the moment with you. And is there truly something in this moment going on? And if so, let's talk about it. Let's communicate. Now, I do understand that we can be in relationships where communication is very low. And there may be some instances where it's because say a business relationship, for instance, where the difficulty is that we may cross a line. So again, this is why boundaries, guidelines, and consequences become an important part of all of this. We create those with each other. We teach people how they're supposed to treat us. So we then have to reinforce a guideline, a boundary, or a consequence based on our own experience and what we want in the relationship. It doesn't mean the other person will accept everything. So for instance, with my partner, I want every detail of the entire day. I enjoy it. It's great fun for me. Don't leave anything out. And he, in the beginning, felt very pressured that he needed to meet this need versus, oh, no, I'm just interested in you. This is joyful. I mean, if you're not enjoying it, then there's a problem here. Instead, he felt like I'm obligated to tell her, oh, I left the job site and went to lunch, and then I was on the phone with my friend, and we talked for 30 minutes. No, that's not the experience I'm asking for. I'm asking for something that you want to share and be encouraged to share. So, again, I set up those guidelines that I want open communication. I don't want any secrets. I don't want any fear. I don't want any hiding. But it takes a long time of consistency in a relationship to bring somebody along who lives steeped in these issues. And again, we're the example, the energetic example, and holding our space is a critical part of making sure that they have the ability to come along with us. Any questions? Okay, so let's talk about the exercise we have today. It's about claiming my space. And in this exercise, when you do it, it's going to help you feel the environment around you. Oh, here. Someone just shared that you described my work life perfectly. Right, it can be very interesting. But let's go back to that for a second. Because what I find when I work with people on this topic, when we hold this balance over time, again, they start to come along. And there's a concept where we share it from head to heart. I'm sorry, from heart to hand and from head to mouth. So in this concept, we plant these seeds. We're creating this change in our reality. We're attracting to us the experience that we want. And in doing that, the person is growing and changing before we can see it happen. And this is the key that tends to break the growth process in the balance between two people, is we will hold our balance for a few days, and then something will happen and we'll break it. And they will go back into, see, you proved to me I wasn't safe, and therefore I can't trust you, and therefore I'm not going to keep moving forward with you. So in that moment, there needs to be a communication. Hey, I wasn't myself. This is not the experience I want to have. I'm willing to grow and change this way with you. Let's see. So a comment came in, not participating in the drama or fear is allowing me to practice being a lighthouse through the darkness. Wonderful. That's a great concept, to hold that space. And again, over time, people grow and change, and the longer we can hold it. So it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months for something subtle like this to become an integrated part of another person's life. And for us to be this balanced individual, at first feels like a whole lot of work and a whole lot of effort, and why am I doing all this when nobody else is? And the only answer I have for you is you're the one looking for the change. And this is why you're going to be the one that does it. Eventually, people create and change with you, but it takes time for them to know what it looks like. People have lived their entire existence without this freedom, without this support, and so they're going to have to learn what that looks like. It's a whole other language for them. So between two people, keeping this balance, again, it's very natural, but we have to break the societal behaviors that are holding us from it. And I remember in the beginning breaking these patterns for myself. One was I didn't actually give my kids any authority. I was the leader in the family, but I didn't speak up when they asked for something that I didn't want to do. I was this over-giving mom. And I used to give them rides because I was sick with multiple sclerosis and there wasn't much more I could do. So I would give them rides and to do anything that they wanted to do. And with 6 kids, you're doing a lot of driving. So they would call me up and, hey, we want to do this. And I'd say, okay, give me a few minutes. I'll be right there. And when I got well, I had to change this habit that I had in place. So when we're working to keep this balance, sometimes we have to make the effort to change a habit in order to restructure the new balance. So now I no longer want to be doing this drop of a hat, everything for them, picking them up and taking them somewhere. And I tell them this. I say, hey, I'm going to give you guys 2 weeks. I'm going to remind you when you ask me at the last minute for something that, hey, I have a real life now. I'm feeling better and I'm up doing things. So I need my own time too. And I want you to give me a little notice. I don't want you to just expect me to do everything at the last minute. And they're teenagers and they're learning and they're growing with me. And we get through this experience in a very interesting way because they're so accommodating and loving that they get this down in a week. They didn't even take the 2 weeks. But in the 3rd week, it's as if my daughter had looked at the calendar. It's like the day 1 of the 3rd week after I'd structured this information. And it's not quite as rigid as it sounds, just but it's the way to explain it. In the 3rd week, I get a call, and my daughter's crying, and she says, Mom, I'm so sorry. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but the other girl's mother who was supposed to pick us up, she can't make it. And now I'm at the mall without a ride, and I don't know what else to do. And she's crying. And I thought, oh, my poor sweetheart. How did I leave out the fact that it's still okay, that these rules are not rigid, that they're guidelines, and that this is not an unapproachable, unchangeable boundary? So when we're reclaiming this space, communicating is super important. It didn't occur to me to tell her that absolutely, if you have a change that you can't control, ask me for support and love. I'm always wanting to be that for you. I of course, that moment I got in the car and I went and got her. But she learned and grew because of the experience. And this is life. This is reality. And this is the amazing balance when we work at having that balance between two people in a healthy way. Questions or comments? And let's see, we have just a couple minutes left. Let me look back at the exercise real quick and see if there's any details we want to discuss about that. My slow computer, give me a second. I'm pulling it up right now. So with the Claiming My Space exercise, you're going to practice first in your safe place, what it feels like to move your energy and push it out of your body. And, push it a few inches, push it a few feet, push it all the way around the earth. Try anything that you want to try. And then what I want you to do, once you've gotten used to what this feels like in your own space, is I want you to do it around another person, because you're going to realize, see, the other person doesn't change who you are, but the other person does bring up your own beliefs about who you are. So I remember the first time I tried something like this, when I expanded my space in a safe place, I was shocked at how I could feel my energy moving through people. And when I would get up against them, my energy, I would stop and move my energy around them. And I thought, how bizarre, because we're all holding the same space and time continuously together. And there is enough space for all of us to spread out completely and not even touch each other, because the space between molecules is huge. But the consciousness thinks that when I touch you, I'm invading your space. So I was holding back from pushing through people, my energy, to open up my space. When you realize that doesn't impact them. When you push through people, you're not actually changing anything about them. There's space between the molecules that they can't even tell you're there unless they want to know. So, and we get more into the egg later, and it'll make even more sense. But it was so interesting to watch myself. What am I creating? How am I having this life experience with others? And then to have to do this over and over and over until I felt free enough to push my energy out in a public place and hold all of me in space and time without fearing that I'm interfering with others in space and time. So I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with this one. Any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, I'm going to assume I lost all of you guys unless you say your goodbyes on the way out the door.
Bye, Christine.
Bye.
Bye.
Great call. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
This call has been recorded.